Great. Welcome. Welcome to World Water Week. This is one of this afternoon's talk shows. To everybody in the room, it's good to see you, and to everyone online, thank you so much for joining. My name is Amy Newsock. I am a freshwater strategy advisor at the Nature Conservancy based in the United States. And the talk show that you have joined is called Every Drop Connects Us: Solutions for People and Planet. We're going to have a provocative discussion, really playing at the margins and on the fine line of trade-offs around water management, the different ways that we choose to manage water, and all the different things that can benefit from the choices that we make. So I'd like to introduce our fantastic set of panelists who are going to speak with passion and credibility on this very topic. So first we have Madhu Rajesh. She is our Global Director for Water and Agriculture at Coca-Cola. Next to her is Sergio Campos. He is our Division Chief for Water and Sanitation at the Inter-American Development Bank. And lastly, we have Nicole Silk, Global Freshwater Director for Outcomes at the Nature Conservancy. So thank you everyone for joining. So this is an opportunity for us to go deeper on the theme of World Water Week, making the invisible visible. This theme really resonated with me and my colleagues at the Nature Conservancy because there are so many aspects of freshwater and the system of managing freshwater that are largely unseen, aspects that are lesser known. Things like freshwater ecosystems and the biodiversity and communities that depend on them. The various benefits that come out of the choices we make when we make these decisions for water management, and particularly on who benefits, both people and planet. So in this complicated system, I want us to draw in and draw out those hidden aspects in your own work. So we're going to talk about what's been successful so far and making these things that are less tangible, tangible. And when you look to the future, how can we work better together in order to derive these tangible benefits for those things that are typically less visible and less seen on the surface? So I have two questions that I've prepared for our panelists today. I'm going to ask the question and then direct it to each one of you. I want this to feel like a discussion, however. So if you do hear something from one of your fellow panelists that you would like to immediately remark on, please feel free to interrupt the flow and do so. But I just ask you to stay pretty concise. All right? So for the first question, I'll pose it. We're going to go to Nicole first, then to Sergio, and then to Madhu. Sound good? Okay. So you each represent different sectors of the water world. In your work related to water, what is invisible that you would like to raise the profile of and make more visible? And to answer this question, if you could take us to a time and place where you've seen better outcomes, you've seen generated tangible benefits that addressed this very thing that was formerly invisible. So Nicole, we'll start with you.
Wow, that's a huge question. And sitting here, and for the folks online too, I'm speaking to a lot of people who think about water all the time. So just as a reminder for all of us, you know, our planet Earth is in a sense a closed system. Water is continuously on the move in that planet. It's flowing through our rivers, it's coming up through groundwater, it's entering the atmosphere, and then it's coming back down, right? So it's all closed. But as we think about rivers and freshwater ecosystems, there's a couple of things that I tend to pay very close attention to. One is, of course, the connection between surface flows and groundwater flows. It used to be, back 20 years ago or so, we thought about those two parts of the freshwater system as being very disaggregated from each other. And we now know that they're not. They're part of the same system, and we're better off when we manage together. There's a couple of other aspects that I think are also incredibly important. One is, how do those systems function? How do our freshwater ecosystems work from a system scale to be able to support the biodiversity that's part of those systems, and also through the generation of water that's important for people, for fiber, for food. And that brings up a whole lot of really important aspects of connectivity and range of habitats, the importance of hydrologic regimes and water quality. And then finally, and this is something that I've spent quite a bit of time over the course of the last few decades, is really thinking about that connection to people. Not only in terms of the water that we drink and the water that we need in our daily lives and the water that's embedded in everything that you see in this room and touch on a daily basis, but also in terms of, frankly, the harms that can come from water. You know, the reality is that water can also disproportionately impact those who don't always sit at the same tables in terms of decision making about freshwater resources and how they can be managed. I think we can do better. And I think the beginning of doing better is figuring out how we do that in partnerships like these three.
Great, thank you. Sergio, I'm going to turn the question now over to you and your work through the Inter-American Development Bank representing the public sector, which I know does a lot of private partnerships, as well as with academics and institutions like the Nature Conservancy. So yeah, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Amy, and hello to all the audience that is has joined us for this talk show. I mean, talking about the invisible, people take water for granted, because you open the tap and it's there, but it's actually not. That's actually not true. In Latin America, there's more than 200 million people that don't have a continuous service. There are 34 million people that don't have access to basic water. And when you look at sanitation, there are more than 2/3 of the Latin American population that don't have access to sanitation, and sanitation goes directly to the source of water, to the rivers or to the lakes. So when thinking about the invisible, solutions are local, but within the basins, which are ecosystems where coexist rural communities, private sector, public sector, and us, the individuals, there's not a common understanding or common ground of how can we use or how should we use the water that we have. That at times there's plenty, but when there's in the dry season, and if you're in a dry water scarce area, it becomes a conflict. So, I mean, thinking out back in things that didn't exist, that today exist, funding mechanism for nature-based solution or preserving the ecosystems, a mechanism that can have a governance in which all parties are involved and have an equal footing in the decisions that are taken, being a rural community, being a private sector, being a public utility, or being an individual. And also a science-based decision model in which the decisions are not taken because I have more resources or I have more people or I have or I'm empowered, no? But because what science decides, it should be the best way to go, no? And what I described in many words are the water funds. The water funds is a partnership that holds us together. I mean, with Fundación FEMSA, Coca-Cola, TNC, we have been for 11 years trying to showcase that a water fund makes sense because it's a local response to a global problem where the decisions are made local. No? It's taken a while. It's taken resources from private sector, from foundations, from the Global Environmental Fund, from the German IKI financing, and from us. No, it's taking resources, it's taking time, but it's something that is proven to be very effective to mitigate and to alleviate the effects of climate change.
Thank you, Sergio. Yeah, there's something that really resonated. Let's keep bringing this out. Is this approach of a local response to a global challenge? And then if I could continue on that clause, how do we respond with collective action at the global level, right? I think all of our institutions have a global footprint. And so how do we think about coming together to take those models that we've tested locally and start to think about how we replicate them globally and other places around the world where they have similar challenges, recognizing that you got to go back to the local level and begin to tailor. And we'll come back to that, I think, in a minute with you, Sergio. Sure. But Madhu, this is exactly what Coca-Cola has been doing as a private sector. You've taken on an interesting role as a representative of the private sector to address some of these more intangible aspects and get co-benefits out of objectives that were of original interest to a private company. So could you answer a little bit and tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course, thank you for asking. Great question, and actually a very interesting topic. So the Coca-Cola Company has had a long-standing commitment to water and corporate water stewardship for well over a decade now. And in 2007, we made a commitment to replenish all the water that we use in our finished beverages. We met that commitment and exceeded it in 2015, 5 years ahead of schedule. And since then, in partnership with our bottlers, the Coca-Cola system, and the Coca-Cola Foundation, we have supported several hundreds of projects globally. And many of these projects, given our goal for water replenishment, were designed as water replenishment projects. But what we've learned through that is that in addition to the volumetric benefits these projects have, there are also some very significant co-benefits, both on the social side as well as on the environmental side. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what we've learned. I'll start with the social side. So with the Coca-Cola Foundation in 2010, had an initiative called the Replenish Africa Initiative that worked across 41 countries in Africa and has to date supported more than 6 million people with access to wash, and it was backed by a $65 million commitment from the foundation. What we learned through the project was that by providing access to wash in communities, there are significant co-benefits, particularly when it comes to gender, because women and girls disproportionately bear the burden of collecting water. And through the time saved for women by not having to collect water, we found many of them were able to start their own businesses or find other ways of livelihoods or stay in schools. And the program also worked in 1,200 schools. And we found that by reducing illness through community wash, we were able to reduce absenteeism in school and therefore improve educational outcomes for children. So those were some of the social benefits. And as a follow-up to this, the Coca-Cola Foundation partnered with Global Water Challenge, funded Global Water Challenge to partner with USAID and the Water and Development Alliance Partnership and Ipsos to conduct a study in 3 countries to really look at what are the empowerment pathways for gender. And we found that there were many issues that access to wash helps with, for example, safety and security, nutrition, economic empowerment, education, livelihood. So a combination of the impact it has from a social perspective. Likewise, we have had a long journey with Natural Capital, and we partnered with Denkstadt to create a methodology which really helped us look at some of the co-benefits of water replenishment projects. And we found that some of our work on replenishment, depending on the kind of project it was, it had benefits around CO2 sequestration, improving soil health, improving farmers' livelihoods, or improving the natural ecosystem, or reducing risks of fires, or improving the tourism potential, and therefore improving the economic prospects of certain communities. So there's been wide-ranging social and environmental benefits that we found through our projects, and those are some of the hidden aspects. Because when you design projects to look at water replenishment and purely water litters, they don't just have replenishment benefits, they have a series of co-benefits. And by being more mindful of those and incorporating them into your project design at an early stage of designing new projects, so when you're thinking about phase 2 extensions of existing projects, you can have a more holistic intervention. And this is, I'd like to just conclude by saying this is a core element of our 2030 water security strategy, where we have maintained our goal to replenish all the water we use. In our finished beverages, we've actually gone down to the level of being context and location specific and responding to local risk, but watershed health and stewardship and community and climate resilience are all key components of that strategy, because you have to look at the context in a very holistic manner.
That's incredible work, Madhu, really. And I love the points that you were just concluding on this holistic approach. I'm hearing that a lot in sessions this week, that we really have to think about water management in a holistic way, even starting from the systems thinking, right, at the early stage, and bringing in a holistic mindset. And that also means the breadth and depth of stakeholders that need to be involved in the decision making of what those strategies look like, and then how those strategies are implemented and adapted actively managed as they're applied, right? This stuff doesn't happen overnight, and we need to move and be able to be flexible, especially in a changing climate. So that's really great. Anything that you heard from one another you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, there was one point that we all touched upon a little bit, which is the importance of learning, of really understanding how these systems function. And that's a continuous journey. We're always trying to figure out how these systems operate, what do they really require from the standpoint of connectivity in order to maintain the high quality water that we're all looking for, and that so are people in these communities looking for. So that process feeds right into this idea of both system scale and ultimately the impact that we're all seeking. Biodiversity can sometimes be a conduit through which to open some of those doors, but so too can audacious goals like we have for replenishment through the work that Coca-Cola is doing. Yeah.
And just complementing what it was said, I think it's fantastic that Coca-Cola has their replenishment program and that it's been very active and taking the leadership on that. But going to the point that you were raising in terms of collective action, I mean, it doesn't matter if they do it right if the others don't do it well. And then thinking about agricultural pollution, industrial pollution, or wastewater, untreated wastewater. No? I mean, in Latin America, I think it's parallel of the world. 2/3 of the wastewater that is produced is not treated. No? So the aquifers are being compromised, and that's where the water comes. No? And then if you include to that the agriculture, the industry, solid waste, really then we need to have collective action. It needs to be multi-sectoral. It cannot be just us individually trying to move ahead. We need to work together. No?
And those challenges are even going to become quite a bit more, right, as a result of climate change, right? We know that something like 50% of the world's population is going to live in places that are even more prone to floods and to droughts and to all these challenges. So collective action is going to be a requirement if we're going to build resilience both into those systems for the future and address all these human and societal needs.
Let's keep playing on this aspect of collective action. The other thing that I'm also hearing is there's a real sense of urgency. You know, there's a lot of political and global dialogues happening right now around creating 2030 goals, 2050 goals, right? And the clock is ticking. We're all facing the impacts of climate change and what that's doing on our water resources and beyond, right? So in the spirit of collective action, with the hypothesis that collective action can create speed and expediency, you know, now building on these past successes that you talked about with replenishment and water funds, et cetera, what opportunities do you see to innovate, to move forward together across sectors? And I'm not even just speaking about the three that we represent in this room, or maybe that's represented at this conference. You know, for example, I would love to see more people from the technology sector involved in this conference. So not to guide anyone's answers or anything, but I am interested to hear what do you think we need to be doing next together, and who else needs to be involved? So Madhu, I'd like to give this question to you first, if you'd like it.
Thank you. Sure. So agree, collective action. And for me personally, SDG 17 is perhaps the most important SDG of all if we are to work together on SDGs, because it's all about partnerships and collective action. For us in our water security strategy as well, we have an element of working with, which I think is perhaps the most important element of working with NGOs, with, on looking at water governance and water policies, working with governments, because the challenges that we face are too big for any company or any institution or any industry sector to resolve on its own. So collective action is a focus. And there are, you mentioned technology, and technology is going to be important because a lot of it is about data and about better solutions and better technological platforms. Artificial intelligence can help us in some cases with solutions. So certainly there's a role that they have to play, not just in water, but also in supply chains and agriculture and climate resilience and different aspects. So certainly that's a key component. I can perhaps share some examples of how we at the Coca-Cola Company are collaborating with peers and across the industry. So we are a founding member of the World Bank's Water Resources Group, which is a multi-stakeholder platform that has brought together different sectors to act collectively on key issues and leveraged co-financing for work on water as well. We're a member of CEO Water Mandate, which is again a multi-stakeholder platform that works across industries on the key issue of water, wash for work, engagement in different basins as a collective. And through many of our partnerships, we are looking at creating some standardized methodologies because we're all trying to act on water, but how do we know we are doing the right thing and have a standard approach? So we worked with Limnotech and WRI and many other companies to help create a method for accounting of the volumetric benefits of water, and that became an industry standard a few years down the line. Likewise, we are in conversation with a number of partners about creating a methodology to look at the water quality benefits. So how can we all have a better understanding of water quality and measure it and design the right set of indicators for it. I mentioned earlier the work we've done with Denkstad on developing the methodology for quantifying co-benefits of nature-based solutions. And that's something that we are now building on both with Denkstad, but also with Limnotech and CEO Water Mandate and other partners to integrate that as part of the NBS Explorer tool and make it available as a free open source resource. So anyone who wants to look at co-benefits of projects can use that and make better programming decisions. We worked with WaterAid and Diageo to look at producing a guidance on some of the gender-related outcomes of WASH projects that can then be integrated into WASH program design. So there are many ways in which we can all share our learnings, because as a collective, we've all got many learnings as a system, and then look at what can be mainstreamed and made available as a free open source resource for other companies, governments, and partners to use as well. So
that's great. Thank you. And conscientious of time, but Sergio and then Nicole, I'll let you just run right in.
I mean, you're right that there's this sense of urgency. The conclusion of the World Water Forum in 2018 was very simple from the regional conferences. We're behind. Financing is not materializing as it should be, and climate change is making things harder. And unless we strengthen the local governments, we won't be able to make it. So that's very sad, because I mean, the SDGs is water and sanitation for all, and then thinking about collective action, I mean, it's very sad. The only thing that is giving us hope is innovation, digital transformation. And through this week, we've seen amazing satellite information, remote sensing, machine learning that are helping us understand better our ecosystems, how the water is working, and things that can be leapfrog from one place to the other. So that's actually going to make us do or help us get where we wanted to get at a cheaper cost and in a faster way. So that's so technology and innovation for us are the game changers, particularly in the water funds and in these collective actions that we want to have. No? And then sometimes when we talk about collective actions, is typically thinking about the public sector, the private sector, the communities, rural communities, and NGOs. But the individual, the user, the female, the male, we need to reach to their communities. They have the power to decide what products they consume, how well they use the water, and then how they want their water to be run. And I think that within the collective actions, we need to always make sure we're reaching the individual.
Nicole, bring us home. That plays to your first one.
Sure, I completely agree with that, and I mean, imagine this world where folks living at the local level can, using their smartphone, quickly be able to determine what's going on within their water footprint, their particular watershed. You know, are they in danger? What do they need to do? How can they get involved? That's the future that we're going towards. And that's the future that TNC's the Nature Conservancy's 2030 goals for freshwater is really about. We are declaring that we're going to work really hard on protecting and restoring 1 million kilometers of rivers and 30 million kilometers of lakes and wetlands. But that can't be done alone. That has to be done in partnership. And ultimately, it has to then relate to people that are working at the local level. Yep.
Well, this could go on for a long time, and I hope it does. This partnership has years behind it, and many people here at World Water Week and a lot of you online. Please keep the conversation going within your own networks. Reach out to us. Just have a wonderful and productive, as well as enlightening rest of your Water Week. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for our panelists.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.